When it comes to Clarence Thomas and Donald Trump, they're tied together by a mutual worship of corrupting power. Now, Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas operates by the same underlying principles of the corrupt power as Donald Trump does. At its core, fascism is a corrupt power where there is one set of rules for the great leader and their followers and allies, and another set of rules and laws and expectations for everyone else. Unrestrained and corrupt power is both the means and ends of the fascist and other anti-democracy projects. And that same corrupt power is a type of unifying energy field for today's Republican Party and the conservative movement more broadly. Donald Trump participated in a decades-long crime spree, and his squatting was built but an opportunity for him to continue with those crimes in a historic and unprecedented scale and level. And the Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas operates with the same underlying principles of the corrupt power as Donald Trump does. Now, for several decades, Thomas has been violating ethics rules by receiving gifts and favors from individuals and groups who have interests before the Supreme Court. Now, as revealed in a new report by the ethics watchdog group ProPublica, for years, Clarence Thomas has been receiving the equivalent of tribute payments, including real estate from his best friend, right-wing billionaire financier and power broker Harlan Crow. Now, as Max Moran notes in the American Prospect, this is not even the first time he has been caught in this exact scandal. Pointing to a 2004 Los Angeles Times report, Thomas's fix for the ethical violation, Moran writes, was to try to make it harder to track. Much attention has been focused on how Thomas's sponsor and benefactor is an apparent Nazi fetish. Now, Crow's attraction to such evil objects and the vile politics they represent and endorse, however, he and his defenders try to excuse, make, and rationalize it with pretzel twisted logic. It's critically important for understanding the agenda to end multiracial pluralistic democracy that Thomas and the other right-wing Supreme Court justices and today's conservative movement are imposing on the country. Now, other observers have focused on how Thomas's corruption is vindicative of larger problems with the U.S. Supreme Court and how it is now a nakedly partisan institution that does not view the law in a neutral way, but instead as something to be bent and weaponized in service to the Republican, fascist, and conservative revolutionary project. Now, it's critically important on their own merits, but these concerns and interventions point to a much larger cultural and political problem. Corrupt power dominates the American elite class, and this has had extremely deleterious consequences for the American people and their well-being. Now, how have Trump and his sycophants responded to his being held accountable under the rule of obvious crimes, and quite predictably, with threats of violence and civil unrest, lies and false claims that Trump is some type of innocent victim, which Trump is not innocent at all, and he's not even a victim. Even more absurd, Trump's cultists are even claiming that he is some type of divinely commanded Jesus Christ-like figure, which he's not, who is being martyred and persecuted by the Democrats and the deep state, which not even the case. Now, through their broken reasoning, the great leader and his or her sycophants are by definition above and outside of the law. Now, for Donald Trump, the private citizen, to be treated the same way as other Americans, even though he has been granted far more latitude of action and freedom from consequences, is deemed unacceptable for the Republican fascists and those who share their beliefs about and commitment to corrupt right-wing power. Now, in the conversation last week with Salon, author and investigative journalist David Mewert had offered these insights about Trump's arrest and arraignment. It's a central element of any kind of autocratic rule, and it's basically degraded and corrupt, and it's a two-tiered version of the rule of law in which the authoritarian rulers are by nature exempt from all legal constraints. Now, while the people they rule over are subject to draconian and even discriminatory enforcement of laws, that's what Donald Trump's defenders have been working towards since the day of him being installed by Russia in 2016, and it's what they're battling for in court now. Like all good authoritarians are trying to convince the public that this kind of de facto immunity from accountability, legal and other ways, is the birthright of powerful men like Trump, which it's not, and the natural state of things, which it's not. And until the advent of democratic rule, that probably was more or less the case. And this is what we'll hear from the neo-fascists who are out there preparing once again to man barricades on Trump's behalf, and not just the proud pricks and three percenter types, but the racist Tucker Carlson and the Jim covers of sex crime Jordan as well. And this is about undermining and ultimately demolishing our democratic institutions, among which the rule of law is probably the most fundamental. And it's not to be overlooked. Clarence Thomas's wife Ginny, who is a right-wing attorney and operative, played a central role in the Trump clan attack on January 6th. If Trump and his cabal's coup plot had developed according to plan, the 2020 election would have been decided in part by Justice Clarence Thomas. Thomas telegraphed what his decision in such a case would be when he was the only member of the Supreme Court to decide in favor of Trump's petition to stop the House of Representatives from accessing documents about the traitors' January 6th Klan attack. Now, Thomas's embrace of corrupt power represents a larger pattern of ethically compromised, if not outright corrupt behavior by the right-wing justices on the Supreme Court. Now, the American people know from experience that there is a double standard where the rich and the powerful are routinely able to violate the law without serious consequences, while everyday people like me enjoy no such privilege. The result is a legitimacy crisis for American democracy, its social institutions and elites, including the news media and the courts, and one of the few American institutions to be basically consistently be held in high regard by the American people is the military, and that is a mark of a failing democracy that can potentially succumb to military rule. Now, Max Moran summarizes this horrible state of affairs. If the highest justices in the country regularly violate the laws that they interpret, then they do not deserve to be arbitrators of legality. Now, failing to act on something this clear means Democrats accept that the regular people have no guaranteed rights and those with power and prestige can do no fucking wrong. Now, refusing to create a big circus might maintain congressional Democrats' personal delusions or bipartisan comedy, which has never been reciprocated. The cost of this self-serving fantasy, though, would be any fleeting claim that the United States government has legitimacy in the first place. Now, like we've said, the corrupt power is a driving force behind too big to fail, and see how the money classes and corporations can make selfishly, grossly irresponsible, and in many cases illegal decisions that cause financial ruin and misery for the American people. Which Trump did that already, and yet those same actors are never held accountable and are instead rescued with public money and other support. The average American has no such protections or safety nets. Now, from pollution and environmental disaster as seen with the recent train derailment in Ohio, the opioid crisis, mass shootings, and other examples of corporate crime and malfeasance, and the corrupt power motivates such behavior and its underlying belief that the rich and powerful are immune from being held responsible for their crimes and the societal and personal harm that they cause the American people. Now, America is fucking sick with extreme wealth, and income inequality, where the money classes and plutocrats literally do not live in the same society as everyone else. The corrupt power helps to create, sustain, and expand such an unjust and anti-democratic arrangement. Now, in many ways, the corrupt power and its inherently fascist attributes are the root of American democracy, and the American democracy crisis in the age of Trump and what it has wrought. Now, healing America's democracy crisis and stopping the ascendant of neo-fascist movements in its various forms demands a moral reckoning where, one, corrupt power is exposed as not being exposed as not being the natural order of things, but instead a perversion of it, and two, the rule of law and in service to justice is applied equally to both the rich and powerful as well as everyday people like me. Now, ultimately, the moral reckoning that the American society needs will necessitate very difficult questions and about the collective character of the American people and the leaders that they put in power. In a profile at the New Statesman, political scientist Brian Klass explained this great challenge in the following way. Our modern society has made it extremely unattractive to normal, decent people, decent human beings, to end up in positions of power. I don't think I'm alone in that. I think there's lots of people who think I can make the world a little better, but the cost might be enormous to me. Klass has conducted over 500 interviews with some of the worst people around, and they weren't normal, and there are quirks about them. There's something wrong with some of them, but they're all very, very good at getting into power, and that's not an accident. There are ways you can counteract that tendency or amplify it, and I think we're unfortunately amplifying it quite a lot. Now, power is a relational thing. You can't be a leader if you don't have followers, so as much as we complain about the leaders that we have. And we have to acknowledge, at least in a democratic society, that we put them there. And that's not just about the bad people, and that's not about systems, but it's about us. Unfortunately, that isn't as easy to correct it as we would like. So if you like the video, you can give the video a like and subscribe to my channel, RBW King. You can also hit the notification bell so you'll be notified when a new video comes out. You can also leave a comment, let me know what you think. And if you want to support my work even further, you can donate to my Patreon link, which you can find in the About section of YouTube. And for just a little as a few bucks a video or a month, your donation can help go a long way. And thanks for listening.